Gary, this is your latest surfboard in at JAHROC.
Yes, my latest little project of passion, making wooden surfboards. So this is a beautiful design of Jim Banks's, a 10-foot gun. And in typical Banks style, it's long and thin and like a rocket, you know, makes them for tube riding big powerful waves. And this one is 10 foot by 19 inches wide by just under 4 inches thick, so it's quite a thick board, which you need to paddle into, you know, 20-foot waves and stuff because you need that extra volume. I've used balsa wood and Australian red cedar. The cedar I picked up in Queensland about 5 years ago. I was lucky I was over there for a timber board convention, funnily enough. And yeah, I scored a nice little log of Australian red cedar. And if you come in more close, it's just red cedar as against the American red cedar. This is it's a hardwood really. It's a very tight grain, it's much slower growing cedar than the American version. And very strong and great for boat building. It has a lot of flex and a lot of strength. So it was actually used by boat builders back in the day, but it's very hard to get now. This came from someone's backyard, I believe. It was being locked in a backyard. And I've used the same stringers. I've got the central stringer and two stringers on the rail with solid balsa edges. That just gives it extra strength, but it'll also give it a bit of flex. So there's nice tail blocks and nose blocks. I might just pull it off the rack so we can see a bit of detailing. Maybe look at first, it's the tail block with a little bridge so that we can tie our leggy onto that rather than having a plug in the board. I didn't like the idea of a modern plug on a beautiful timber board, so I used a bridge technique, which is an old technique. What do you want me to do, turn it round? And there's the fins, again handmade. They've actually got cedar and silver ash, which is another Australian timber, which is also very strong and relatively light. It is a hardwood as well. But that gives those fins a nice flex, so I'll actually flex. This is a usable board, weighs about 8.5 kilos, possibly a little light for its size, for surfing really big waves, but it's definitely rideable, which was the whole idea of making this one. I've made quite a few now, but I wanted to make a big board that was rideable, that wasn't too heavy. So, I mean, it's heavy, but it's a big board, so it's, you know.
What is the weight of it?
Well, it weighs 8.5 kilos. I was aiming at 10, so funnily enough, it ended up a little light. But you never know what you're doing with these things. It's all a bit of a guessing game when I'm making them. Done a nice bit of pearl detail here, up around the nose. Beautiful mother of pearl inlays, and again the inlays here around the logos. Up in the nose here is the nose block with a thin layer of balsa between the two layers of red cedar. And again, another nice characteristic of Jim's is he has those beautiful pulled-in noses that don't grab as you take late drops. That's a nice line looking through it there, just looking down the board. It's a beautiful thing. Would seem a shame to wax it up, but maybe one day we will. Or the owner, who decides they might purchase it. Nice lines on the rails there. I had a lot of respect for surfboard makers after I've made a few wooden boards because there's just so many lines going on. And there's, particularly with timber, you've got to get the timber to do things that it doesn't like to do, so you've got to steam it and bend it and push it and nurture it. But hand shaping a rail and trying to get both the rails identical, it's tricky. So. And
then how do you finish it?
Yeah, David did that. Well, I glassed it. I glassed it with 2 layers of 4 ounce on the deck and 1 on the bottom, which again is very light for a glass board, but for a wooden board it's probably enough. And then David did about 6 coats of an acrylic clear lacquer, which is a crystal clear lacquer which inhibits the sun from hurting the timber and also ends up very hard and clear, so it doesn't change the colour of the timber at all. Mm. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing, and you know, there's definitely times I would have liked to have put an axe to it because it's a struggle building something like this. But of course, once you get to this stage, you love it again. That's just the way making goes. It's a love-hate relationship. And there we go, the 10-foot Banks gun.